The Demon Slayer mark is one of humanity's most powerful tools in the fight against demons, and awakening it is the only way to stand a chance against upper moons like Akaza and Kokushibo. In today's video, let's take a look at what would happen if Tanjiro awakened his Demon Slayer mark in episode 1. First up, we need to look at the circumstances under which the Demon Slayer mark can be activated. For a swordsman to awaken their Demon Slayer mark, they must reach a heart rate of over 200 beats per minute and a body temperature of over 39 degrees Celsius, which can be fatal for most humans. In fact, Muichiro Tokito stated that survival is the key difference that separates marked Demon Slayers and the ones who fail to activate it. The second rule is that you must be in contact with someone else who has awakened the mark. In fact, this condition is so powerful that the mark can spread among swordsmen as they battle in tandem with each other. So, how does Tanjiro awaken his Demon Slayer mark? Well, he's already been in contact with his father, Kamado Tanjiro, so meeting another marked individual is not a problem. The life-threatening situation arises when Tanjiro returns home after collecting firewood, and discovers that his family has been killed by demons. His heart rate is already rising as the panic sets in, but then Tanjiro finds that Nezuko has been turned into a demon, and she viciously attacks him. Tanjiro wants to protect Nezuko, but she's trying to kill him, and her strength already rivals his own. With his emotions spiraling out of control, Tanjiro awakens the Demon Slayer mark and wrestles Nezuko to the ground, successfully restraining her and holding her in place. But can Tanjiro survive the process? Well, even though he knows nothing about breathing techniques, Tanjiro's body is already strengthened by years of work as a coal burner, so chances are he ends up surviving the mark. It's at that moment that Giyu turns up at the scene. The water Hashira senses a demonic presence and sees Tanjiro pinning Nezuko down. As he proceeds to attack, Giyu realizes that Nezuko is the demon and that a human child is controlling her with his bare hands. Amazed by Tanjiro's potential, Giyu helps him restrain Nezuko and listens to his story, choosing to send the siblings to Sakonji Orokudaki. Now, Tanjiro's training doesn't end quicker, because unlocking the mark doesn't necessarily mean his understanding of total concentration breathing or water breathing forms improves. However, Tanjiro's strength and resilience do seem to have been boosted, and he ends up being much stronger when he leaves for the final selection. We know that being in a life or death situation is a prerequisite for the Demon Slayer mark to be awakened, so the hand demon at the final selection is not quite enough to trigger such a strong reaction. However, Tanjiro still passes the final selection with flying colors and moves on with the rest of his missions. We can skip over the swamp demon as well, since he wasn't on the same level as some of the others, and the fight against Susumaru and Yahaba also takes the same direction as the original timeline, thanks to Tamayo and Yushiro's assistance. The battle against Kyogai in the Tsuzumi mansion pushes Tanjiro close to awakening the Demon Slayer mark, but, once again, he's able to find a path to victory in the nick of time. And this brings us to the Mount Narakumo arc, where Tanjiro faces his first truly hopeless battle against the Lower Moon 5 Rui. With his sword shattered and Nezuko's life at stake, Tanjiro desperately fights against Rui's threads, but is unable to make any progress against the spider demon. But things change when Tanjiro recalls his father performing the Hinokami Kagura, and just as he switches to sun breathing, he also awakens the Demon Slayer mark for the second time. Nezuko awakens her blood demon art at the same time, and distracts Rui as her burning blood disintegrates his threads, clearing a path for Tanjiro. With the added strength and speed boost along with his Nichiren sword turning bright red, Tanjiro is able to cleanly slice off Rui's head before the Lower Moon 5 can pull off any tricks. The water Hashira Giyu arrives on scene just in time to see Rui's body disintegrating and realizes that Tanjiro and Nezuko have taken down a member of the 12 Kizuki on their own. After Shinobu notices Nezuko, the siblings cannot be hidden from the Demon Slayers any longer, and they're brought in front of the Hashira to determine their fate. Sanemi decides to test Nezuko just like in the original timeline, while Obanai pins down Tanjiro so he cannot intervene. Sanemi brutally stabs the young demon and then slices his own arm, taunting Nezuko with the scent of his Marechi blood. Now, the difference here is that Tanjiro awakens his mark once again, but this time with all the Hashira present as witnesses. He throws off Obanai with ease, and it's Gyomei who manages to restrain Tanjiro with his heavy chains and flail. Unable to escape, Tanjiro screams out at Nezuko, telling her to stay strong and remember her humanity. Together with the power of Orokudaki's hypnosis that ordered her to protect all humans, Nezuko turns away from Sanemi through sheer force of will. Seeing how Nezuko can resist feeding on humans, and given Tanjiro's immense potential, Ubuyashiki Kaguya decides to grant them the right to hunt demons together. But additionally, Tanjiro's Demon Slayer mark captures the attention of the Hashira. Kyojiro remembers something similar being referenced in the Rengoku family archives, and decides to take Tanjiro as his pupil. Now, at this point, Tanjiro is separated from Inosuke and Zenitsu, since it wouldn't really make sense for him to train under Shinobu at the Butterfly Mansion anymore. Together with Kyojiro, Tanjiro begins deciphering both the Hinokami Kagura and his Demon Slayer mark. By the time he's assigned to the Mugen Train, Tanjiro's understanding of both these things is far more comprehensive, and he's actually had time to work on the various sun-breathing forms. This completely changes the events of the Mugen Train arc, as Tanjiro ends up being a far more competent adversary against Enmu, and performing sun-breathing techniques no longer puts a tremendous strain on his body. As a result, Tanjiro is capable of fighting alongside Kyojuro when he takes on Akaza after defeating Enmu. So does this change the outcome of the battle? Thanks to training alongside Tanjiro, Kyojuro is able to awaken his Demon Slayer mark against Akaza as well. With both Kyojuro and Tanjiro being marked, and Tanjiro having a greater mastery over his sun-breathing, the battle with Akaza is much closer. This time, the flame-breathing 9th form Rengoku actually lands a hit on Akaza, with enough force to behead the Upper Moon 3. Tanjiro and Kyojiro's incredible fighting spirit gives Akaza the showdown of his life, and he's able to lay his soul to rest, resulting in a landmark victory for the Demon Slayers. Thanks to this victory, Kaguya initiates his plan to take down Muzan much earlier, and connects Shinobu with Tamayo to speed up the development of the anti-Muzan drug. However, Tanjiro's success ends up hurting his former companions, as he's no longer at the Butterfly Mansion when Tengen turns up there looking for Demon Slayers to accompany him to the Entertainment District. So what changes during the Entertainment District arc? Well, Tanjiro's absence really hurts their chances, but the real distinction is that Nezuko isn't there to heal the Demon Slayers from Gyutaro's poison. While it's entirely possible that Tengen is able to pull off a miraculous victory against Gyutaro and Daki, the key difference is that Tengen and Inosuke probably end up dying of their injuries. Leading up to the events of the Swordsmith Village arc, Tanjiro has been accompanying Kyojuro on missions and gradually rising through the Demon Slayer ranks. However, his fighting style remains the same, and Tanjiro ends up breaking his sword yet again, forcing him to travel to the Swordsmith Village to get a new one from Hagan Nezuka. Despite having the mark, the events of this arc don't really change much, given that there were no Demon Slayer casualties in the first place. Furthermore, Mitsuri and Muichiro awaken their Demon Slayer marks in the battle anyway, without Tanjiro's help. Kyoko and Hantengu's deaths end up severely hurting the demons once you realize that Akaza has already been killed in this timeline. However, Muzan does not stay cautious because he becomes desperate to capture Nezuko after hearing that she overcame her vulnerability to the sun. But the other reason Muzan rushes is because Tanjiro's early mastery of sun-breathing and marked state make him eerily similar to Yoriichi, leading Muzan to believe that things will get much worse if he doesn't act immediately. But before that, the Hashira training arc takes place with a crucial difference. Tanjiro's role in killing Rui, Enmu, Akaza, and Hantengu elevates him to the rank of Hashira, making him the first Sun Hashira in 5 centuries. The other crucial difference is that the Demon Slayer mark is much better understood thanks to Tanjiro and Kyojiro's studies, meaning that the Hashira actively train this ability. By the time Muzan launches his attack on the Ubuyashiki mansion, Zenitsu, Kanao, and all the Hashira are capable of unlocking the Demon Slayer mark at will when they're in a tough spot. At this point, the odds look pretty stacked in the Demon Slayer's favor, and honestly, that's how things would play out in the Infinity Castle arc as well. Once Yushiro is able to take control of Nakime's vision, things begin to go downhill, as Giyu and Tanjiro are not occupied with the Upper Moon, and Kyojiro is alive as well. This means they split up into battles against Doma and Kokushibo. But even those battles aren't as close as before because the Demon Slayers are far more skilled and awaken their marks earlier on. While Shinobu may still die at Doma's hands, Muichiro ends up surviving the fight against Kokushibo because the Upper Moon 1 ends up being overwhelmed by the Hashira charging him from all directions. As the Demon Slayers confront Muzan, the Demon King realizes that this generation of Demon Slayers far surpasses his expectation. As he burns away in the sunlight, Muzan wonders what he did wrong. Should he have focused on building his forces instead of seeking the blue spider lily? Or was his mistake not wiping out the Kamado family in its entirety? And that brings an end to the tale of the Demon Slayers. Do you think this timeline is better than the original? If so, make sure you like and subscribe so you never miss another awesome Demon Slayer story.